Hello, I'm Stephen Matchett from Campus Morning Mail, and this is Expert Opinion, where we ask people who really know what's going on in universities, what's going on. Expert Opinion is brought to you by Australia's original, and many say best, higher education comms consultancy, Twig Marketing. And so it's good morning to Tim Winkler and to Amanda Johnson, who makes it all happen. It's ranking season, which means universities are spruiking their achievements on lists of top institutions for water polo and plasma physics, for example. But there's one ranking that researchers really watch, and that's the CWTS Liden report on research outcomes from the Netherlands. This never makes much of a media splash, what with there not being a single score marketers can promote, and what with it being really, really complicated. But it is a better guide, a much better guide than most, perhaps all other rankings, as to how universities are performing on a range of research metrics. The new Liden ranking is out, and Uncle Calderon, who knows which way is up when it comes to performance metrics, joins me. Uncle is Principal Advisor for Planning and Research at RMIT and a regular interpreter of rankings in CMM. I should also add that he consults on metrics to the QS agency. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Any surprises for Australian universities in this year's Liden?
Not at all, really. But I think if we keep the narrative of what we're trying to build up over the year, is that there are already signs that are emerging for which Australian universities ought to pay attention. So at least one thing about the Liden metric, and one of the reasons that many of us like this ranking is strictly bibliometric and is objective ranking. It's one that doesn't suffer from the vagaries or institutions providing data or saying something I don't like it, that then I filter that one out. So this ranking basically tells us, and the other thing about this ranking, it basically takes into account the publications which were for the first year of the pandemic year, that is 2020. So it covers 3 years. So in essence, there are no surprises in there in terms of the publications or the impact measures and the collaboration measures. But I think the area where Australian universities ought to be focusing more is on the gender metrics and also on the metrics about open access, where I think we all need to be paying more attention, and there's a fair bit of work to be done over many years. To achieve a change in those two dimensions in the rankings, it will take some years. It's not as easy to change that kind of performance in those in the indices of the gender and open access, because it is something that will take a few years to modify the behavior and the way to do it.
Okay, let's back up a bit and tell me, what are the core attributes that Liden looks at, and how do they do it differently to the more popular ranking?
So Liden uses the data from Clarivate, basically the Web of Science, and basically what Liden also does, it takes a different view to how the other ranking companies pull out the data. So for example, they will be using the data that was published, as I said, from the past 3 years. They will be looking at from the Web of Science, and they try to normalize the data. And they will be basically looking publications for the period between 2017 to 2020. So that had that 4-year window period, and then they will be looking at the stations that occur from there until the end of 21. So in that way, it differs to the way QS and THG use the data. So QS and THG, just a way to recap, they use data from Elsevier, or Scopus Elsevier. So it's slightly different. And then what THG also does is tries to make sure that it matches the best possible way the affiliations. As you will possibly imagine, institutions have so many different ways, or the authors, the way they publish the data is quite not standard. So they have a bit of work they do that. So I like that dimension. The other thing about the Liden ranking is that it has a combination of metrics that have metrics on impact, collaboration, and then the gender and the open access. One of the other things about Liden ranking, unlike the other rankings, is they don't produce an aggregate score. So then no one can basically say, I'm the best on the Liden ranking. People can say, we're one of the best on the Liden ranking on these kind of metrics, or that kind of other metrics. So in that sense, it's quite different.
Yeah, and Liden makes it explicit in its collateral that if you're a student looking somewhere to study, don't look at this, because it's measuring things entirely different to the student experience.
Yes, so rankings like people can use, for example, students could be using, which is also one of the rankings that was also released this week, is the U multi-rank, which basically designed to have
hang on, Uncle. The who rank? The what rank?
U multi-rank.
Oh, U multi-rank.
Yeah.
The one from the European Union.
European Union. So yeah. the construct of this ranking is completely different to any other because it's a multidimensional, and this one is certainly tailored to be looked at the students.
Yep. Yeah.
So in that sense, that is completely different ranking to the Liden ranking is one that perhaps is better suited for those people who are looking at changing careers, who are researchers, and they want to know more about the nuances about the academic research endeavors and so forth.
Yeah, debating the inputs into rankings is a bit like 16th century theology. It's immensely entertaining for those who understand it, but very few do. One thing that's curious about Liden, though, is that when you look at the ranking, and they do rank on particular attributes, they all rather look the same as all the other rankings. The first 10 in Australia are generally the group of 8, and often Curtin. And it varies to who else. In some ways, it sort of indicates that collectively rankings, just through sheer consistency, probably get it, roughly speaking, right.
Yes, and the funny thing, I'm glad you mentioned this because there's another ranking that also came out this week, which is the Round University ranking. And this is a ranking produced by a Russian agency. Even the Russians are involved in rankings. They don't get much publicity, but they also use data from Clarivate. So the Round University ranking has 4 pillars. It has a pillar of teaching, research, financial sustainability, and the reputation side of things. And the other thing with this ranking has in total, it has 20 metrics, which also has some per capita. So collectively, those kind of rankings tell you a story about the university. You just need to know which ranking and which indicator to look at and how to drill down or untangle the data that sits behind there. So it tells they tell you the story. And of course, there are so many people who will be jumping up and down about the rankings over the many years, which in many cases are correct in arguing about the flow methodologies. But as you say correctly, the rankings tell you there's some sort of consistency in how universities are being perceived.
So tell me, who across from memory 4 core attributes in Liden, who in Australia, which institutions have done well with you?
So typically Australian universities, so the group A universities will tend to do well, but we also see there in Liden that the universities from the ATN and the other competing universities like Wollongong, Griffith universities continue to progress well. So you change the metric, you get the thing output. And this is the thing about the Liden ranking, that it almost gives the opportunity to everyone to claim top position for a particular dimension. And the other thing about the Liden ranking, it gives you an opportunity to rank your performance based on the volume or as a percentage. And you see slight different in there. So from that perspective, it's good. So the group of A universities will do less well on metrics on gender, for example. And then what you see there, for example, and the reason I wanted to comment on this is because in one of the metrics, I think it is about the women or females, or the proportion of females authorship. It is universities like La Trobe who do really well. So it is not the usual suspects that you will think that will do really well on that. So that is the things in there that you need to be looking at. That typically we know that most research intensive institutions will do well in the traditional metrics on publications, mean normalized citation scores, top publications, the 1, 10, 5%, and so forth. But when you look at the different things from a different angle, then you see the differences in there. And that is the thing where you find that everyone in Australia is relatively doing some good work. You just need to pick the right one to start making the claims.
Given there's now a fair body of evidence underpinning Liden, are there any trends you see in the last one that should concern Australian universities?
To me, the concern is in the following: is Australia remains lagging lots of the other countries in relation to open access publications.
Yep.
And I think for Australian universities to continue to be competitive on that research space, it will take some years and some efforts and possibly some investment, or at least modifying some sort of behavior. The other one is about women in academics, or the gender, or how they call it, gender, females, the proportion of females authorship. For there to see a significant change, probably will take some years. It is one of the things that we have sort of been highlighting for many years, to what extent women are enrolled or studying in STEM fields of study and so forth. So if we translate this from this perspective of the students to academics, then we'll see the same thing. So this is a fair bit of work the universities will need to be doing over many years to improve the balance.
This is in terms of women in publishing in research.
Yes.
Right.
But it also gets down to women involved in academia, and to what extent the career mobility and the pathways are for women to progress.
Right. Okay.
So, it's a sort of things in there that, to get the results you want to see, there are so many things institutions need to change in order to get the desired outcome.
One thing that I'm curious about is that research translation now is basically the new orthodoxy, that a day doesn't go by without a state government offering more money, particularly applied research in a given field. Last year, from memory, in Liden, 9 Australian universities were in the global top 100 for publications co-authored with industry. Is that a trend continuing?
Yes, and I think that trend will continue. The other thing about this publication, this stuff around the industry, to get a significant change in performance, it's something that happens over multiple years. And in fact, remember that the data we're looking here is for the period that covers 2017 to 2020. So it's lagging data. So probably in the next 4 or 5 years, we're likely to see a shift if that kind of investment continues to be in place. But the other thing too, we also have to keep in perspective is that what the rankings are telling us is that other countries are investing and perhaps are putting greater emphasis on promoting and advancing higher education than what we see here from the Australian government. So we have done so well for many years, but in order to remain this level, maintain that level of competitiveness, we need to either increase the support to universities or ramp up the level of investments that we have, or be clever or smart in the way we make choices. And I think the rankings, one of the things that keep telling us, keep underlining, is we have to be better at making decisions that over the long term will benefit our institution. And this is not because we want to influence the rankings, but it is to ensure that the sustainability and viability of our institutions remain competitive. And if we are going to be seen as a country which has a unified national system that is advancing and is progressing compared to other national systems.
I should make clear that Liden does STEM. I mean, there is nothing in here for the humanities and social sciences. Nothing is relevant to their experience.
So Liden has 5, it produces subject rankings at 5 levels. And it's perhaps more high levels than what you will see with QS. But that level of information they provide, they give you so many good insights, and always encourage our researchers to look at those rankings, because they tell you something about what is shifting and how it's shifting.
What do you say to a research office when a vice chancellor says, "Tell me what is good and bad about this ranking"?
What is good about this ranking? It removes the subjectivity that we see with other rankings. It's strictly bibliometric or objective from that perspective, and it's perhaps one of the rankings that in the research community is well regarded.
Yeah. Okay. What should Australian universities be looking to in this year's ranking in terms of strategy?
I think the first thing the things I would be looking is perhaps taking a longer term view as to where where we want to be investing, what kind of choices we want to be, and how we want to be supporting our researchers who are emerging and ensuring that we are able to, pass the 2 years of the pandemic, how we can then readdress the sort of inefficiencies that we have experienced in the past 2 years, and then taking the longer term view. And I don't think we can continue to be just thinking that we can be having the good luck we have had with rankings. I mean, when the results from QS came up early in the month, we saw that there was the continued weakening of the reputation, so the perception of Australian university is somehow tainted.
Why is that?
Why is that? Probably we have seen too aggressive, the fact that the Australian borders were closed for 2 years, and probably there might be a level of arrogance that many people outside Australia perceive about our Australian universities. Or maybe we have been seeing less trusting institutions.
Okay. Tell me, I mean, it seems to me that the global takeout for this is as usual, China. China seems, I had a quick look on a couple of the attributes. China has got the large, around half the numbers in the top 10.
Yes, and I think this is what we're seeing now is with China. They have had the level of investment over many years. So China, in terms of the publications, is progressing well. Where China is still lacking many of the high-income economies is in the normalized field citation or the impact measures. But probably China will get a bit better over coming years. But what we also see is geographically, and this is part of what we're experiencing now, or the geopolitical tensions, is that we are going back to start collaborating with the people that we have had collaboration for many years. So China has made good progress over the past few years, but I'm not too sure whether China will continue to be making this strong progress in the measures of impact. Probably it will be slow down a bit, but it's no guarantee that the Western economies or high-income economies will continue to perform as well. So I reckon what we're seeing is a bit of tightening of the competition from all fronts.
There was some research this week from Curtin University on open access publication outside the English-speaking world, and of course, it revealed this, these enormous enormous research efforts that we very rarely hear anything about. Two that came up was Indonesia, but mainly Brazil. How do nations like that step outside the traditional journal system, how do they get their achievements recorded?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. The various ranking schemes try to make effort to capture as best possible the data or publications that are not published in non-English languages, sorry, in languages other than English. And it's extremely hard. And I think Elsevier and Clarivate have been making effort, but I think the Liden ranking focuses strictly on English publications. So there's already a weakness there from that perspective. So how the other ranking scheme will try to do this? I think what we have seen increasingly is that people from other countries, from non-English speaking countries, are seeking to increase the level of collaboration with people from English-speaking countries away to bolster the things. And probably the best way to be doing this sort of stuff is recognizing that there's a fair bit of work in science that occurred that is not in English and have that embedded in the ranking schemas. It is easier said than done, because in many cases we don't see that already information being correctly captured, and it's quite not quite a disgrace, but it's quite a shame that knowledge that exists in other languages is not translated. And somehow these ranking schemas continue to perpetuate the view from English-speaking countries or, high-income economies where English is the main language.
Not much do we do about that. Look, thank you, Uncle. It's good as ever to get a perspective of people who actually understand this stuff. It's certainly too hard for me. But thank you for your time. I think you're writing on this in CMM today, I think, from memory.
Yeah, I'm providing a view on the performance of Australian universities on the Liden ranking. I'm sort of trying to cover, give you a sense of the impact measures, the collaboration measures, and also a couple of things that institutions need to be doing in relation to improving the gender balance of outputs and the open access.
Okay, look, that's in CMM today, which is Monday. Thank you for your time, sir. We'll be back talking to you soon, I hope. Expert opinion from Campus Morning Mail. We're out. Thanks.